She cared for cold, paralyzed CEO 4 years. He faked his love, and she caught him with the maid. Every morning, she'd arrive at his bedroom suite at 6 sharp. The routine never changed. Check his vitals. Adjust his position to prevent bed sores. Spoon-feed him breakfast while he watched her with those dark, intelligent eyes that seemed to hold entire conversations. What would you do if the person you cared for could walk away all along? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. She had wiped his tears for 4 years, never knowing he could walk away from her all along. What would you do if the person you cared for could walk away all along? Have you ever given everything to someone who was lying to your face? This is about trust, betrayal, and discovering your own worth. Stay with me as we uncover how deep this deception goes. The Montana estate stretched endlessly under starlight, its windows glowing like predatory eyes watching her every move through corridors she thought she knew. Alana Rivera pressed her back against the hallway wall, heart hammering against her ribs. What she just witnessed in the West Wing made no sense. It couldn't be real. Nathan Cross, the man she'd bathed, fed, and cared for every single day for 4 years, had been standing, walking, laughing with 22-year-old Mallory, like he didn't have a care in the world. 4 years ago, she'd stepped off that plane in Bozeman with one suitcase and a heart full of hope. The private nursing job promised more money than she'd ever seen. Enough to cover her mother's cancer treatments back in Atlanta. Enough to finally breathe. The helicopter crash had left Nathan paralyzed from the neck down, they said. A brilliant tech CEO reduced to blinking responses and wheelchair transfers. She became his lifeline, his only connection to the world. Every morning, she'd arrive at his bedroom suite at 6 sharp. The routine never changed. Check his vitals. Adjust his position to prevent bed sores. Spoon-feed him breakfast while he watched her with those dark, intelligent eyes that seemed to hold entire conversations. She'd undress him for his daily bath, her hands clinical but gentle as she washed every inch of his body. His skin was warm, muscles still firm despite years of supposed immobility. Sometimes she'd catch him staring at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, expression unreadable. Those were the moments that confused her most, where her pulse quickened and her breath caught, when caring for him felt like something more dangerous than duty. If you've ever wondered how far someone would go to hide the truth, you need to hear this story. Hit that subscribe button because this gets darker. She'd moved into the staff quarters, a comfortable apartment in the estate's east wing. Her world shrank to the size of his needs. Wake up, care for Nathan, sleep, repeat. Weeks became months, became years. Her mother's treatments continued successfully. The paychecks arrived on schedule. Nathan's condition remained the same, or so she believed. Then Mallory arrived 6 months ago. Young, blonde, energetic, hired to help with housekeeping and meal preparation. Nathan's demeanor shifted almost immediately. He smiled more, slept better, seemed more alert during their daily routines. Alana told herself she was imagining things. Professional jealousy, maybe. After all, she'd been his primary caregiver for so long. Of course, she'd feel territorial about another woman entering their carefully balanced world. But tonight, walking past the forbidden West Wing because she couldn't sleep, she'd seen the impossible through that window. Nathan standing upright, hands gesturing as he spoke to Mallory, moving with the fluid grace of a man who'd never lost the use of his legs. The betrayal hit her like a physical blow. Every bath she'd given him, every meal she'd fed him, every night she'd sat by his bedside during his supposed anxiety attacks, holding his hand and whispering reassurances, all of it based on lies. As she stood frozen in that doorway, watching him laugh with another woman, one thought cut through her shock like glass. If he could walk, what else had been a lie? She touched him every day for 4 years, believing she was healing someone broken, not knowing she was the one being destroyed. The medical equipment hummed like mechanical heartbeats in the master suite, chrome and sterility making intimacy feel clinical, safe, necessary. But now, standing in her own apartment at 3 in the morning, every memory felt contaminated. She remembered that first meeting so clearly. Nathan Cross, once Silicon Valley's golden boy, lying motionless in the specialized hospital bed they'd installed in his bedroom. His face was still handsome despite the hollow exhaustion. Dark hair, sharp jawline, eyes that tracked her movements with laser focus. "This is Alana Rivera," the head of nursing had said. "She'll be your primary caregiver." Nathan's gaze had locked onto hers, and something electric passed between them. Not romantic, she told herself firmly, just recognition. Two people who understood what it meant to fight for survival. Have you ever confused caring for someone with loving them? When does duty become devotion? Share your thoughts below. The daily routine became their language. She'd enter his room each morning, and those dark eyes would find hers immediately. No words needed. She'd read his needs in the set of his shoulders, the tightness around his eyes, the way his breathing changed when she approached. Bathing him was the most intimate part. She'd learned to be efficient, professional. Roll him gently to wash his back, lift his arms to clean underneath. Her hands moved over his body with practiced care, but she couldn't ignore how solid he felt, how his muscles hadn't atrophied the way they should have after years of paralysis. His skin was always warm under her touch. Sometimes, when she'd lean across him to adjust his pillows, she'd catch him watching her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. Their bodies inches apart, her hands on his chest, his eyes burning into hers. "Alana," he'd whispered one evening, voice rough from limited use. She'd been helping him into his pajamas, fingers working the buttons of his shirt. "What is it?" She'd leaned closer, close enough to smell his expensive cologne mixed with something uniquely him. He just stared at her for a long moment, lips parted like he wanted to say something important. Then he closed his eyes and shaken his head slightly. She'd finished dressing him in silence, her pulse racing from their closeness. Like this video, if you've ever felt responsible for someone else's healing. Now she understood. Those moments of connection, the electric tension she'd felt during their most intimate caregiver routines, it had all been performance. He'd been fully aware, fully capable, watching her care for his body while knowing he could push her away and walk out the door anytime he chose. The night before everything changed, he had looked at her with such intensity while she adjusted his pillows. "Alana," he whispered, voice rough from years of supposed silence. She leaned closer, heart racing. "What is it?" But he just closed his eyes, lips curved in what she thought was gratitude. Now she wondered, had it been triumph? 22-year-old Mallory arrived like spring after a long winter, and suddenly, the man who never smiled began to laugh. Mallory moved through the estate like she owned it, blonde hair catching sunlight that seemed to follow her, while Alana remained in the shadows of medical necessity. Everything about the younger woman sparkled with possibility. Her laugh echoed through hallways that had been silent for years. Her presence transformed the sterile mansion into something alive. The changes in Nathan started immediately. After 4 years of careful, measured responses, he became animated. His eyes followed Mallory's movements with obvious appreciation. His rare smiles became frequent, triggered by her cheerful chatter about nothing important. Alana told herself it was good for him. Social stimulation from someone outside the medical routine. A break from the intensity of their caregiver relationship. But watching them together felt like swallowing glass. Have you ever felt threatened by someone younger in your workplace or relationship? How did you handle those feelings? Mallory would breeze into Nathan's room while Alana was working, bringing fresh flowers or asking if he needed anything special for lunch. The girl had no medical training, no understanding of his supposed limitations, and somehow that made her more appealing. "Morning, Mr. Cross," Mallory would sing out, setting a vase of wildflowers on his bedside table. "Isn't it gorgeous outside? I was thinking maybe we could move your wheelchair onto the balcony later. Get you some fresh air." Nathan's face would light up like she'd offered him the world. "That sounds perfect, Mallory. Thank you." Alana would continue her clinical tasks, checking his catheter, administering medications, monitoring his vital signs, while they chatted about movies and music and places they'd love to travel. Normal conversations between two normal people, if you ignored the fact that one was supposedly paralyzed and the other was being paid to dust furniture. The jealousy ate at her slowly. She devoted 4 years to Nathan's care. She'd sacrificed her own social life, romantic possibilities, career advancement. Her entire world revolved around his needs. And this girl waltzes in and gets his smiles, his attention, his obvious desire, just by being young and pretty and uncomplicated. Comment below if you've ever sensed something was off, but couldn't prove it. The day everything started to crack was a Tuesday in April. Alana was helping Nathan with his lunch. The same routine they performed thousands of times. Spoon to his lips, wipe his chin, check that he was swallowing properly. Mallory came in with his afternoon medications, moving with her usual bouncing energy. As she leaned over to place the pill cup on his bedside table, her wrist brushed against Nathan's arm. Alana saw his hand move, not the involuntary muscle twitches she'd documented in his medical charts, not the spasms that sometimes occurred during position changes. This was deliberate, controlled. His fingers reached toward Mallory's skin with obvious intent. The movement lasted maybe 2 seconds before his hand went still again. When Alana blinked and looked closer, Nathan appeared as motionless as ever. But Mallory was smiling, a secret little curve of her lips that made Alana's blood freeze. The day Mallory brought Nathan his lunch, Alana noticed something that made her blood freeze. His hand moved, not the involuntary twitches she'd documented for years, but a deliberate reach toward the young woman's wrist. When Alana blinked, his hand was still again. Had she imagined it? The first lie was about his paralysis. But when Alana started digging, she discovered it was just the beginning. The estate's library held decades of medical journals and case files, leather-bound secrets illuminated by a single desk lamp as rain hammered the Montana wilderness outside. Alana had never been much for research, but desperation made her thorough. Nathan's medical files were extensive, but strangely incomplete. The initial hospital reports from his helicopter crash painted a picture of devastating spinal trauma, complete loss of motor function below the neck, grim prognosis with minimal hope for recovery. But the follow-up reports told a different story. Or rather, they didn't tell any story at all. Most paralysis cases involved years of detailed documentation, physical therapy attempts, specialist consultations, experimental treatments. Nathan's file went dark after the first 6 months, as if his medical team had simply given up. When did you first realize someone you trusted was lying to you? What made you finally start questioning? She cross-referenced his injury with similar cases in the medical journals. Spinal cord damage at his level typically resulted in specific patterns of muscle atrophy, bone density loss, circulation problems. Nathan showed none of these expected complications. His muscle tone remained excellent. His skin had healthy color and texture. His bones appeared strong based on the x-rays she'd helped position him for during routine checkups. Everything about his physical condition contradicted his supposed paralysis. The deeper she dug, the more questions arose. Why had he chosen to isolate himself on this Montana estate instead of staying near world-class medical facilities? Why had he hired private nurses instead of working with rehabilitation specialists? Why were there no records of him seeking experimental treatments or second opinions? Subscribe and hit the bell if you want to see how deep this deception goes. 3 weeks of late-night research led her to the most damning discovery. Hidden in his private office files, behind locked drawers she'd learned to pick during her teenage years in rough Atlanta neighborhoods, she found what she'd been looking for. A second medical opinion, dated 6 months after his accident. The neurologist's assessment was startlingly different from the initial diagnosis. Patient shows significant improvement in motor function. The report stated in clinical black and white. Reflexes returning in lower extremities. Sensation present throughout body. Full recovery possible with continued therapy and time. The report was dated 3.5 years ago. 3.5 years of watching her care for him, believing he was helpless while he possessed the ability to heal and chose not to. But the final paragraph made her hands shake with rage. Patient has declined further treatment. States he prefers current care arrangements. Recommends psychological evaluation to address apparent resistance to recovery. He'd been offered the chance to heal. Medical professionals had given him hope for a normal life. And he'd chosen to remain in his performance of paralysis rather than give up the control it provided. Control over her. Over her life, her devotion, her complete surrender to his needs. Hidden in his private office files, she found it. A second medical opinion from 6 months after the accident. The words made her hands shake. Patient shows significant improvement in motor function. Full recovery possible with continued therapy. The report was dated 3.5 years ago. She caught him walking, but what destroyed her wasn't his legs working. It was the sound of him laughing with someone else. The West Wing glowed with warm light spilling from windows she'd never been allowed to approach. And through them, she saw a man she didn't recognize wearing the face of someone she'd loved. Nathan Cross stood in the center of what appeared to be a fully functional living space. Not a medical facility, not a sterile sick room. A normal apartment with comfortable furniture, entertainment systems, and the kind of casual luxury that spoke of regular use. He was shirtless, wearing only dark jeans that hung low on his hips. His body was lean and strong, moving with the fluid grace of a man who'd never lost the use of his legs. Every muscle she'd maintained through careful physical therapy was his to command. Mallory sat curled on the couch, wearing nothing but an oversized shirt that barely covered her thighs. Nathan's shirt, Alana realized with sickening clarity. The intimate way they occupied the space together spoke of familiarity, of nights spent in each other's company while Alana slept alone in the staff quarters. Have you ever discovered someone living a completely different life behind your back? How did it feel to realize you never really knew them? Nathan was talking, his voice animated in a way Alana had never heard. His hands gestured expressively as he spoke, and Mallory's laughter rang out like music. They looked like lovers. They looked happy. They looked like two people who shared secrets and inside jokes and physical intimacy. Everything Alana had been denied for 4 years. She pressed closer to the window, her breath fogging the glass as she watched the man she devoted her life to living fully without her. Nathan moved to the couch, settling beside Mallory with easy familiarity. His hand found her bare thigh, fingers tracing patterns on her skin with obvious possession. The casual intimacy of the gesture broke something inside Alana's chest. She'd touched his body thousands of times, but always clinically, professionally, with gloved hands and medical necessity. This was different. This was choice, desire, pleasure shared between equals. Mallory turned toward Nathan, her face tilted up toward his with obvious invitation. When he leaned down to kiss her, Alana felt bile rise in her throat. His hands tangled in the younger woman's hair, their bodies pressed together with the desperate hunger of people who'd been waiting all day to touch each other. Like if your heart is breaking for Alana right now, and comment what you would do in her situation. This wasn't recent. The way they moved together, the comfort with which they occupied the space, the practiced intimacy of their touches. This had been going on for months. While Alana performed her daily caregiving routines, Nathan had been living a full life with another woman just steps away. Every gentle touch she'd given him during his baths. Every time she'd helped him dress, her fingers careful and professional on his skin. Every night she'd sat beside his bed during his supposed anxiety attacks, holding his hand and whispering comfort. He'd been capable of so much more, and he'd chosen to take her devotion while giving his desire to someone else. As she turned to flee, her foot caught the door frame, sending her stumbling. The sound made Nathan's head snap toward the window. For one terrible moment, their eyes met across the distance, his wide with shock, hers blazing with 4 years of betrayal. He mouthed her name, but she was already running. She had 4 years of questions, and he had minutes to explain before she walked away forever. Dawn broke over the Montana mountains like a wound. Red light bleeding across the estate as she packed her life into boxes that suddenly seemed impossibly small. For years reduced to 2 suitcases and a broken heart. She'd spent the night walking the grounds, rage and betrayal churning in her stomach like poison. By sunrise, shock had crystallized into cold fury. She would leave this place, but not without answers. Nathan was waiting for her in the main kitchen when she came down with her luggage. He sat in his wheelchair, fully dressed and wearing the mask of helplessness she now recognized as performance art. The sight of him pretending to be paralyzed made her want to scream, "Alana." His voice was carefully modulated, the same gentle tone he'd used during their most intimate caregiving moments. "We need to talk." "Do we?" She set her suitcases down with deliberate force. "About what? Your miraculous recovery? Or about how you've been lying to me for 4 years? What would it take for you to forgive someone who lied to you for years? Is there a point of no return?" For a moment, his careful facade slipped. She saw a calculation in his eyes, the rapid assessment of a man deciding which lies might still work. The glimpse of his true nature was more chilling than his deception. "It's complicated," he said finally. "The paralysis wasn't complete. I had some sensation, some movement that gradually returned. But I was afraid." "Stop." The word came out sharp enough to cut. "Don't you dare make this about fear. I saw you last night, Nathan. Walking, talking, living your life with that girl while I sacrificed everything to take care of you." His jaw tightened. Mallory is young and beautiful and getting everything from you that I never could." Alana's voice cracked despite her efforts to stay controlled. "Do you have any idea what you took from me? For years of my life, my career, my relationships, my mother's health depended on this job, and I never questioned whether you deserve my care." Nathan's hands gripped his wheelchair armrests, and for a split second, she saw his knuckles go white with tension. Even now, his body betrayed the strength he claimed not to have. "I never asked you to sacrifice anything," he said, voice hardening. "You made your choices, based on your lies." The accusation exploded out of her. "You let me believe you were helpless. You let me bathe you, feed you, move your body like you were an invalid. And the whole time, you were capable of walking away. Tell me in the comments, should she hear him out or run? What would you do?" The mask fell away completely then. Nathan's expression shifted into something cold and calculating. The face of a man who'd built a billion-dollar empire through strategic manipulation. "You want the truth, Alana? Here it is. I could have recovered faster, yes. But I chose this arrangement because it worked. You're an excellent nurse. Discreet, dedicated professional. Why would I give that up?" The casual cruelty of his words hit her like a physical blow. "Because it was based on lies. Because I deserved to know what I was really choosing. And now you do." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. "Your mother's medical bills have been paid directly through my foundation for 3 years. Leave now and that stops." As she reached for her car keys, he spoke words that stopped her cold. "Your mother's medical bills. I've been paying them for 3 years. Leave now and that stops." The keys fell from her numb fingers as she realized the cage had been bigger than she'd ever imagined. The paralysis was fake, but the web of control he'd built around her was devastatingly real. His office transformed from medical sanctuary to corporate battlefield. Mahogany and steel reflecting a man who'd built empires on calculated moves, including the conquest of her loyalty. The envelope he'd given her contained more than financial records. Inside were copies of NDAs she'd signed without fully understanding, employment contracts with clauses that went far beyond typical healthcare work, and documentation of every dollar he'd spent on her mother's care. Nathan had been playing a longer game than she'd imagined. "Sit down, Alana." His voice carried the authority of a CEO, not an invalid. "Let me explain how this really works." She remained standing, suitcases still in her hands like shields. "I'm listening." 3 years ago, your mother's insurance was denied for her experimental treatment. The hospital was going to discharge her to hospice care. I intervened. He wheeled closer, and she noticed how smoothly he maneuvered the chair. Even this was practice performance. $2 million in medical expenses, specialists flown in from Germany, clinical trials that aren't available to the general public. Have you ever realized someone was controlling your life through money or dependency? How did you break free? The numbers hit her like physical blows. She'd known her mother's treatment was expensive, but she'd assumed insurance covered most costs. The idea that Nathan had been personally funding everything made her dizzy. "Why?" she whispered. "Because you're worth it." His eyes held hers with disturbing intensity. "Not just as a nurse. As a person, you have integrity, loyalty, compassion, qualities that can't be bought, only earned through careful cultivation." The clinical way he described her devotion made her skin crawl. "You mean manipulation? I mean investment." Nathan pulled out his phone and scrolled through what appeared to be financial records. "Your salary was just the beginning. Your mother's treatment, your apartment in Atlanta that I've maintained, the scholarship fund I established in your name at nursing school. You've been my most successful long-term project." She stared at him, horrified by the scope of his control. "Project? I identify exceptional people in difficult circumstances. I provide resources they desperately need. In exchange, I receive services that can't be purchased on the open market." His smile was cold and satisfied. Absolute loyalty, complete dedication, the kind of care that comes from genuine gratitude and emotional investment. Subscribe for more stories about people fighting for their freedom against impossible odds. There have been others. It wasn't a question. Of course, your predecessor, Sarah Chun, lasted 3 years before she became problematic. The nurse before her managed 5 years until she started asking too many questions. "You've been my most successful case study." The casual way he discussed manipulating women's lives made her want to vomit. "And if I leave, your mother's treatment stops immediately. The apartment lease is terminated. The scholarship money gets redirected to other causes." He leaned back in his wheelchair with the confidence of a man holding all the cards. "You're free to go, of course, but freedom has consequences." Nathan opened a leather portfolio and spread documents across his desk. "Or you can stay, accept reality, continue receiving excellent compensation for work you're already trained to do. Your mother lives, you prosper, everyone wins." The contract she'd signed 4 years ago wasn't just employment, it was ownership. But buried in the legal language, she found one clause that made her smile for the first time in days. He'd made a mistake, and she was about to use it to destroy him. She'd spent 4 years learning every secret of his body. Now she'd used that knowledge to expose every secret of his lies. The estate security cameras had recorded everything, their red lights blinking like digital witnesses to years of deception, and she knew exactly which angles would reveal the truth. Alana had always been observant. It came with the nursing territory, noticing small changes in patient behavior, identifying problems before they became critical, remembering patterns that others missed. Now, she turned those skills toward collecting evidence of Nathan's deception. She started with his medical equipment. Most of it was functional but unnecessary. The specialized bed could have been replaced with a regular mattress months ago. The monitoring devices recorded normal vital signs that prove his body was healthier than his diagnosis suggested. The physical therapy equipment showed where patterns consistent with active use, not passive manipulation. What would you do if you discovered you had evidence to destroy someone who'd manipulated you? Would you use it? His daily routine provided the richest source of evidence. She began documenting everything with her phone, using the nursing skills he'd paid her to develop against him. Photos of his muscle tone, videos of reflexes that shouldn't exist in a paralyzed patient, audio recordings of conversations where he forgot to maintain his helpless persona. The other staff members were more willing to talk than she'd expected. The groundskeeper mentioned seeing lights in the West Wing at odd hours. The cook admitted to preparing meals for 2 people instead of Nathan's supposed liquid diet requirements. The cleaning staff had been instructed to avoid certain areas during specific time periods. Everyone had noticed inconsistencies. No one had felt comfortable questioning their wealthy, supposedly disabled employer. The breakthrough came when she accessed Nathan's computer system. 4 years of intimate caregiving had given her knowledge of his passwords, security habits, and personal information. He trusted her with access because he believed she was too devoted to betray him. His digital files revealed the true scope of his manipulation. Email threads with previous nurses discussing their termination packages. Financial records showing payments to women across multiple states. Legal documents outlining NDAs designed to prevent disclosure of his activities. Comment below, is revenge ever justified? What would you do in Alana's position? Most damaging were the video files stored in encrypted folders. Security footage from his private West Wing apartment showing months of normal activity. Nathan walking, exercising, entertaining guests, living the life of a fully functional man while she maintained the illusion of his disability. The videos were time-stamped and dated, providing undeniable proof that his paralysis was performance art. Some footage showed him preparing for their daily care sessions, practicing his helpless posture and limited responses before she arrived each morning. He'd been rehearsing her manipulation like a theater performance. The final piece of evidence came from an unexpected source. Hidden in his desk drawer, she found a journal where Nathan documented his case studies. Pages of clinical observations about her behavior, emotional responses, and psychological vulnerabilities. He'd been studying her like a lab specimen, noting which approaches were most effective in maintaining her loyalty. One entry made her hands shake with rage. Subject responds well to subtle physical contact during care routines. Increased intimacy of touch maintains emotional investment without crossing professional boundaries. Recommend continuing this approach to strengthen attachment. He'd weaponized even their most tender moments. The call came at midnight from an unknown number. Miss Rivera? This is Sarah Chun, Nathan Cross's nurse before you. We need to talk. What he did to you, he did to me too. And I have proof. She wasn't his first victim, just his most devoted, until the others found her. The diner in Bozeman buzzed with late-night energy, but their corner booth felt like a war room where battle-scarred women planned their revolution over cooling coffee. Sarah Chin looked nothing like what Alana had expected. Mid-30s, sharp-eyed, with the kind of controlled composure that came from surviving corporate boardrooms and personal betrayals. Her handshake was firm, her smile grim but genuine. 3 years, Sarah said without preamble. That's how long I lasted before I figured out his game. How did you know to contact me? Alana asked. I've been monitoring his employment patterns. Private nursing positions with suspicious longevity, NDAs that go way beyond standard healthcare confidentiality, financial arrangements that create dependency. Sarah pulled out a tablet and showed Alana a spreadsheet. You're number 4 in the past decade. Have you ever found strength by connecting with others who've shared your experience? How important is that support system? The list of names made Alana's stomach clench. For women, all experienced nurses, all hired during personal financial crises, all kept for years beyond what any legitimate medical condition would require. What happened to the others? Jennifer lasted 5 years until her mother died, and she no longer needed the insurance coverage. Maria lasted 2 years until she got pregnant, and Nathan decided she was distracted from her duties. I left when I realized he was recording our private conversations in his supposed bedroom. Sarah reached across the table and touched Alana's hand. The gesture was brief but grounding, woman to woman, survivor to survivor. The thing is, we all fell for it. We all believed we were special, that our care was making a real difference. He's incredibly good at making you feel chosen, valued, essential to his recovery, even when there was no recovery to make. Alana's voice came out flat and bitter. Especially then. He doesn't want to get better, Alana. He wants control. And helplessness is the perfect weapon because it makes you feel guilty for questioning it. Like this video, if you believe in women supporting women through trauma. Sarah opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. Security footage from my time at the estate. Medical records that contradict his supposed condition. Financial documents showing the pattern of manipulation across multiple employees. And this. She handed Alana a legal document that made her pulse race. Class action lawsuit. We're going after him for fraud, emotional manipulation, and violation of employment rights. The lawyer thinks we have an excellent case, especially with your evidence added to ours. You want to sue Nathan Cross? The idea felt impossible and thrilling at the same time. I want to destroy him. Sarah's voice carried steel underneath the professional calm. Men like Nathan count on women staying silent, isolated, grateful for whatever scraps of attention they receive. They count on us being too ashamed or financially dependent to fight back. But we're not isolated anymore, Alana said, understanding flooding through her. No, we're not. Sarah smiled, and for the first time since discovering Nathan's betrayal, Alana felt something other than rage and despair. She felt power. Sarah reached across the table, pressing a flash drive into Alana's palm. Security footage from my time there. He didn't know I copied it before I left. You want to destroy him? This will do it. But once you see what's on here, there's no going back. The footage revealed a man who walked, talked, and lived fully while she sacrificed everything believing he was broken. The laptop screen glowed in her Atlanta apartment as video evidence played. Months of Nathan living normally while she remained trapped in his carefully constructed prison of lies. Alana had flown home the day after meeting Sarah, using her saved vacation time to process everything she'd learned. Her mother's small apartment felt like a sanctuary after the isolation of the Montana estate. But even here, Nathan's influence followed her through the medical equipment he'd paid for, the comfortable furniture his money had purchased. The flash drive contained hours of security footage spanning Sarah's 3 years at the estate. Every file was labeled with clinical precision: subject mobility, day 847. Physical capabilities, month 23. Interaction with staff, various dates. How would you handle discovering years of your life were based on someone else's lies? What would you do with proof of their deception? Nathan's deception was even more elaborate than she'd imagined. The footage showed him exercising in his private gym, hosting video conferences with business associates, entertaining women who weren't his employees, all while maintaining the performance of paralysis during official care hours. One video made her pause the playback, hands shaking. Nathan was preparing for a care session, practicing his helpless posture in front of a mirror. He'd position his body carefully, check that his expressions looked appropriately vacant, even rehearsed the slight tremor he'd developed in his left hand during their intimate bathing routines. Every vulnerable moment she'd shared with him had been theater. The financial records Sarah had included painted an even darker picture. Nathan's medical manipulation wasn't just personal, it was business. He'd written off millions in caregiving expenses as tax deductions while claiming disability benefits he didn't qualify for. Her salary, her devotion, even her mother's medical care had been tools in his larger scheme of fraud. But the most devastating files were the recordings. Audio from her private conversations with Nathan during their most intimate moments. Times when she'd whispered encouragement during his supposed anxiety attacks. Moments when she'd shared her own fears about her mother's health, her financial worries, her growing feelings for him. He'd recorded everything, and worse, he'd shared selected clips with other people. Business associates who found it amusing that his nurse had developed feelings for him. Medical consultants who praised his psychological manipulation techniques. Legal advisors who helped structure his fraud to avoid prosecution. Comment below, what's worse, being lied to or wasting years of your life on those lies? Her phone rang, interrupting the nauseating replay of her own voice expressing concern for Nathan's well-being. The caller ID showed Nathan's number, and for a moment, her finger hovered over the answer button. Old habits died hard. Instead, she let go to voicemail. His message was brief and threatening. Alana, I know you're upset, but consider your mother's situation before you do anything rash. Some bridges can't be rebuilt once they're burned. The casual cruelty in his voice made her decision easy. She called Sarah immediately. I'm in, she said when Sarah answered. Whatever it takes to stop him. Are you sure? Once we file the lawsuit, there's no going back. Nathan will use every weapon he has against you. Alana looked around her mother's apartment. The medical equipment, the comfortable furniture, the evidence of Nathan's financial control over every aspect of their lives. He already has. The only difference is now I'm going to fight back. As the final video file loaded, her phone rang. Nathan's name appeared on the screen, but she knew he couldn't have discovered her evidence yet, unless someone had warned him. The phone kept ringing as paranoia crept up her spine. How many people were part of his game? She walked into that courthouse to fight a billionaire with nothing but truth as her weapon. But truth, it turned out, was sharper than money. The courthouse steps in Bozeman became a battlefield where cameras flashed like gunfire and reporters circled like vultures. But she climbed each step with the steady gait of someone who'd finally found solid ground.
Sarah had connected her with Marcus Williams, a civil rights attorney who specialized in employment fraud cases. He was younger than Alana had expected, with the kind of quiet intensity that suggested he'd built his reputation by winning cases others wouldn't touch. 3 victims willing to testify publicly, documented evidence of systematic fraud, and video proof of deliberate deception, Marcus said during their first meeting. This is the kind of case that makes careers. Filing the lawsuit required facing Nathan's legal team, an army of expensive attorneys whose job was to destroy her credibility before the case ever reached trial. They attacked her character, her professional competence, even her motivations for staying in Nathan's employment for 4 years. Have you ever had to fight someone with more resources than you? What gave you the strength to keep going? Miss Rivera, Nathan's lead attorney, said during her deposition, "Isn't it true that you developed romantic feelings for Mr. Cross during your employment?" The question was designed to humiliate her, to reduce their professional relationship to a cliché of a nurse falling for her wealthy patient. But Alana had prepared for this. "I developed professional compassion for someone I believed was suffering," she replied calmly. "That's what good nurses do." The manipulation of those feelings was entirely on Mr. Cross's part. The media attention was overwhelming. Nathan's public relations team worked overtime to paint him as a victim of greedy employees trying to exploit a disabled man's generosity. They highlighted her mother's medical bills, suggesting she was motivated by money rather than justice. But Sarah had prepared for this too. The other victims came forward publicly, creating a pattern that even Nathan's expensive PR team couldn't explain away. 3 professional women, all with excellent credentials, all telling similar stories of manipulation and deception. Subscribe if you're rooting for the underdog in this fight. The preliminary hearing drew protesters on both sides. Disability rights groups supported Nathan, believing he was being attacked for his condition. Women's advocacy organizations supported Alana, recognizing the broader pattern of workplace manipulation. Judge Patricia Morrison was known for her no-nonsense approach to civil cases. She'd built her reputation handling complex fraud cases and wouldn't be intimidated by Nathan's legal firepower. "This case will be decided on evidence, not emotion," she announced during the first hearing. "Both sides will have equal opportunity to present their facts." Nathan attended the hearing in his wheelchair, playing his role perfectly. He wore a simple suit that emphasized his supposed frailty, positioned himself where the cameras would capture his most sympathetic angle, even had Mallory beside him as a devoted caregiver. The performance might have worked 4 years ago. Now Alana saw it as confirmation of everything she'd accused him of. When the judge set the trial date, Nathan's eyes found hers across the courtroom. The look he gave her was cold and calculating, the expression of a predator whose prey had finally learned to fight back. The judge's gavel fell, setting the trial date. But as Alana left the courthouse, a stranger approached with an envelope. "Miss Rivera, someone wanted you to have this." Inside was a photo of her mother leaving the hospital, with a note that made her blood run cold. "Drop the case, or she stops getting treatment." He'd controlled her through love, then money. Now he was threatening the one person she couldn't lose. Atlanta's Grady Hospital became a fortress where security guards flanked her mother's room, and every visitor was a potential threat in Nathan's shadow war. The photo had been taken 2 days earlier, showing her mother leaving the hospital after her routine checkup. The image quality suggested professional surveillance equipment, and the timing meant Nathan's people had been watching her family since the lawsuit was filed. Alana hired private security with money she'd borrowed against her future settlement. The cost was devastating, but the alternative was unthinkable. Nathan had proven he would use any leverage available, and her mother's life was the ultimate weapon. "Baby, you don't have to do this for me," her mother said from her hospital bed, for drip, keeping her comfortable during another round of chemotherapy. "I've lived my life. You shouldn't sacrifice your chance at justice for an old woman. What would you do if fighting for justice put your family at risk? How far would you go?" "Mama, he's been controlling our lives for 4 years through your medical bills. If I back down now, he wins. Other women will suffer the same way I did." Her mother's eyes held the same fierce determination that had raised Alana as a single parent in one of Atlanta's toughest neighborhoods. "Then we fight. Together." The threats escalated quickly. Nathan's investigators dug into every aspect of Alana's past, looking for vulnerabilities they could exploit. Her college transcripts, employment history, even her high school disciplinary records were subpoenaed and leaked to friendly media outlets. They painted her as an opportunist who'd manipulated Nathan's generosity, a woman with a history of financial problems who targeted a vulnerable man for his wealth. The fact that she'd worked multiple jobs to support her education and family was twisted into evidence of desperation and greed. Marcus Williams warned her that the character assassination was standard procedure in high-stakes civil cases. "They can't attack the evidence, so they're attacking you. It means we're winning. Like if you think she should keep fighting no matter what, comment if she should protect her family first." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Mallory, Nathan's young accomplice, contacted Sarah through an encrypted messaging app. "I want out," the girl's message said. "He's not who I thought he was. I have information that could help your case, but I need protection." Mallory's testimony revealed Nathan's operation was even larger than they'd suspected. He maintained similar arrangements with vulnerable women in multiple states, using different medical conditions as cover for his manipulation. The young woman had been recruited not as a lover, but as part of his psychological warfare against Alana. "He wanted you to see us together," Mallory admitted during her secret interview. "He said jealousy would make you more devoted, more willing to compete for his attention. Everything was calculated." The final escalation came at 3 a.m. when Alana's phone rang. Her mother's hospital room number had been changed without notice, and security couldn't locate her for 2 hours. When they finally found her in a different wing, her mother was sedated and confused. The hospital phone rang at 3 a.m. Her mother's voice was shaky but determined. "Baby, I heard what he's threatening. You don't stop fighting for me. You hear? I didn't raise a daughter who backs down from bullies." But as Alana hung up, she noticed something that made her heart stop. Her mother's room number had changed, and nobody had told her. In that courtroom, 4 years of lies faced one woman's truth, and only one would survive. The courtroom held its breath as video evidence played on screens, showing Nathan Cross walking while the woman who devoted her life to him sat in the gallery, finally free from the chains of his deception. Marcus Williams had structured their case like a military campaign. First, establish Nathan's pattern of deception through medical records and expert testimony. Second, demonstrate the systematic nature of his manipulation through multiple victim accounts. Finally, present irrefutable video evidence that destroyed his disability claims. Dr. Rebecca Torres, a spinal injury specialist from Johns Hopkins, reviewed Nathan's medical files with devastating precision. Based on his initial injury reports and subsequent recovery patterns, Mr. Cross should have regained significant mobility within 18 months. The decision to maintain a paralysis performance was psychological, not medical. Have you ever had to tell your truth in front of people who didn't want to hear it? How did you find that courage? Sarah testified first, her professional composure holding steady as she described 3 years of manipulation. Her voice only wavered when she read from Nathan's journal entries about her emotional vulnerabilities. Jennifer and Maria followed, each adding pieces to the puzzle of Nathan's systematic exploitation. The pattern was undeniable. Target vulnerable women during financial crises, provide essential support to create dependency, then exploit their gratitude for personal services that went far beyond medical care. Alana's testimony was scheduled for the final day. As she walked to the witness stand, Nathan's eyes followed her with the same intensity she'd once interpreted as need. Now she recognized it as the predatory focus of a man calculating his next move. "Miss Rivera," Marcus began gently, "please tell the court about your first day caring for Mr. Cross." She spoke steadily, describing 4 years of devotion based on lies. The intimate care routines that Nathan had recorded and shared. The emotional manipulation disguised as medical need. The financial control that extended to her family's survival. Nathan's defense attorney tried to rattle her during cross-examination, suggesting she'd been a willing participant in whatever relationship existed between them. But Alana had been preparing for this moment since the night she'd discovered his deception. "I was hired as a medical professional," she said clearly. "I provided professional care to someone I believed was disabled. The fact that he was capable of normal function while accepting that care makes him a fraud, not a victim." Comment, "Justice, if you're here for this moment." The video evidence played without sound, but the images spoke volumes. Nathan exercising, entertaining guests, living normally while Alana maintained the fiction of his helplessness just floors away. When the final piece of evidence was presented, Nathan's own journal documenting his manipulation techniques, his legal team requested a recess. But it was too late. The truth was out. As the jury foreman stood to read the verdict, Nathan's eyes found hers across the courtroom. For the first time in 4 years, she didn't look away. Whatever came next, she was ready. The foreman cleared his throat. In the matter of Rivera versus Cross, the gavel fell like thunder, and with it, for years of lies crumbled into the truth she'd always deserved. Sunlight streamed through the courthouse windows as reporters surrounded her. But for the first time in years, the attention felt like validation rather than violation. "Guilty on all counts," the jury foreman had announced. "We find the defendant liable for fraud, emotional manipulation, and violation of employment contracts. We award damages in the amount of $12 million. $12 million. More money than Alana had ever imagined, but the number felt secondary to the public vindication. Nathan Cross, Silicon Valley's golden boy, had been exposed as a fraud who'd built his comfortable isolation on the backs of vulnerable women. Nathan's reaction was the final proof she'd needed. As the verdict was read, his carefully maintained helplessness cracked. He gripped his wheelchair armrests with obvious strength, his face contorting with rage rather than the patient suffering he'd performed for years. What does justice look like to you? Is it punishment, compensation, or simply being believed? The media circus outside was overwhelming. Cameras, questions, demand for statements about her victory. Marcus guided her through the crowd, his hand steady on her back as they navigated toward her car. "How does it feel to win, Miss Rivera?" a reporter shouted. "It feels like telling the truth," she replied, "and having people finally believe it." Nathan's empire began crumbling immediately. Federal investigators launched probes into his tax fraud and disability benefit claims. Other victims came forward from across the country, emboldened by her successful case. The foundation he'd used to manipulate her mother and countless others faced criminal charges. But the sweetest victory was personal. Her mother's treatment would continue, now funded by legitimate insurance and Alana's settlement money. The medical equipment Nathan had used to control them was replaced with devices they owned outright. Sarah called that evening, voice bright with triumph. 3 more women filed complaints today. Jennifer's considering a separate lawsuit for the recordings he made. You started something bigger than just your own case. Share this story with someone who needs to know that truth always finds a way. Alana stood on her mother's hospital balcony, watching Atlanta's skyline glow in the evening light. For the first time in 4 years, she felt truly free. No one owned her devotion. No one controlled her choices. Her life was her own again. The settlement money would provide security, but more important was the knowledge that Nathan could never manipulate another woman the way he'd manipulated her. His methods were exposed, his credibility destroyed, his carefully constructed empire of lies reduced to legal wreckage. As she walked down those courthouse steps, a free woman, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Congratulations. You inspire me to tell my truth too. Thank you for showing us how to fight back." She realized her story was just the beginning of something bigger. She'd entered his world as a caregiver and left it as a liberator, not just for herself, but for every woman who'd ever been told her truth didn't matter. The new Survivor Center in Atlanta buzzed with hope and determination. Its walls covered not with medical equipment, but with testimonials from women who'd found their voices through shared truth. 6 months after the trial, Alana had used part of her settlement to establish the Sarah Chun Foundation for Workplace Justice, named for the woman whose courage had made everything possible. The center provided legal resources, counseling services, and financial support for victims of employment manipulation. Her mother's recovery was progressing better than anyone had expected. Free from the stress of financial uncertainty and Nathan's psychological control, she'd responded to treatment with renewed strength. The doctors were optimistic about her long-term prognosis. "You look different," her mother observed during one of their weekly lunches. "Lighter somehow, like you're finally taking up the space you deserve. What would you do with a second chance to live authentically? How would you use your painful experience to help others?" The foundation had helped 17 women in its first 6 months. Employment fraud cases, medical manipulation schemes, financial coercion disguised as generosity. Nathan's methods weren't unique. They were a playbook used by predators across the country. Alana found purpose in this work that she'd never experienced as a traditional nurse, helping other women recognize manipulation, find legal resources, rebuild their lives on their own terms. Every case reinforced her belief that survival meant more than just escaping. It meant ensuring others didn't suffer the same fate. Marcus had become more than her attorney. Their professional relationship had evolved into friendship, then something deeper. He understood her need for independence, never tried to rescue or control her. Their intimacy was built on honesty and mutual respect, everything her relationship with Nathan had lacked. "You saved yourself," he told her after their first real kiss. "I'm just grateful you're willing to share that strength with me." Nathan's appeals had all failed. He was serving a federal sentence for fraud while facing additional charges in 3 other states. His Montana estate had been sold, the proceeds distributed among his victims. Mallory had testified against him in exchange for immunity and entered a witness protection program. The young woman had sent Alana a letter through their attorney. "You showed me what courage looks like. I'm starting college next fall, studying social work. Maybe I can help people the way you helped me." Alana's story proves that no lie lasts forever and no manipulator wins in the end. If this moved you, smash that like button and subscribe for more stories of people who refuse to stay silent. Drop a comment telling me what part of her journey inspired you most. And remember, your truth matters, your voice matters, and you're stronger than anyone who tries to silence you. Sometimes the greatest love story isn't about finding someone else. It's about finding yourself again.